purpose of this video is to demonstrate some basic features of pivot tables, which you learned in tutorial 5. I'm going to select in my area of data here, and I'm going to say Insert Pivot Table. And I can create a pivot table from a range of data such as this, or actually from a table of data. It doesn't make any difference. And Excel has estimated what my range of data is. It does a pretty good job. I'm going to put it on a new worksheet. Now what I want to do is I want to display the counts of contributions by fund name. And so I'm going to go ahead and select my fund name field here. And what you can see here is I've got 4 different funds. And what I want to do is I want to get counts of the number of donations that have been made or pledges that have been made for each of these. The field values displays numbers, and so I can take any field to display a count. I'm going to take the pledge ID field first, or the pledge number, and boy, that doesn't look quite right, so I'm going over to the pledges, and what I can see here is that the pledges is just a sequence number, okay? And when I select a numeric field in the values, it by default wants to add things up. And I did not want to add up pledge numbers, which has no meaning. I wanted to use a count. And so if I select down here just off the screen is an option called Value Field Settings, and rather than a sum, I change that to a count. That gives me a total of 28 records, which is what I know from prior videos, how many contributions have been made. And so it's important that you recognize when you use numbers down here, whether you're counting or adding, what it is that you want to do. I also want to point out that if you're interested in counts, that any field will work. I can instead select a field like donor name, which just has a list of names. Of course, I can't add those up. So the only thing I can do by default is count them. And so I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to see that. But I also wanted to see this not just by fund name, but also by the donor type. So I'm going to drag donor type down here into the row labels. And now what you can see is bird sanctuary. I've got 4 total contributions, 3 by individuals and 1 by organizations. Okay. Now when I start working with things like this, I get multiple levels. Sometimes it's helpful to change the formatting of this. So under Pivot Table Tools Design tab, Report Layout, rather than showing it in compact, maybe the outline or the tabular form is helpful. I'll pick outline form this time. What you can see here is it's got separate columns. And I've got bird sanctuary, individual, and organization are the components that make that up, and so I can kind of see how that works. Now the other thing that I want to do is show how I can change the display of this. So if I take donor type and move it on up ahead, now what you can see is by donor type, then by fund name, and now my subtotals are a little bit different. I can see I have 20 total individuals and the number of contributions for each fund name. Now the power of the pivot table really comes from your ability to see things more kind of in a matrix form. This is really a list. I've got individual and organization and then subcategories under that and just a single list of data. But I have the column labels, and I urge you to evaluate the use of column labels when you're making your pivot tables. So in this case, I'm going to drag donor type up over to the column labels area. And now I get a very interesting display. I can see my fund name, and then I've got columns of individual organization. So I can actually see now totals by individual and organization, by donor type, and I can see totals by fund name as well as the overall grand total. And this is really a much more powerful view. I've got a lot more detail available to me, I think, in a better organizational fashion. Again, under the pivot tables design, if grand totals are of no interest, I could turn them off for rows and columns. Oops. Or I could turn them on for column or for both. Here I've got columns only, or here I've got rows only. Thanks.